So I'm going to let it record for just a minute so that when I edit, it's not cutting anything off. Okay, here we go. All right. Thank you, Dr. Lemmons, for meeting with us today in order to do this show. So excited to be able to ask you questions and to have our audience learn more about you and about the work that I always ask everyone that I do the podcast with this first question. What does it mean to be you in this season of life right now?
Well, right now, I feel like I'm really learning to be better at listening to my body, being still, putting my health first above other demands, and being okay with that. I'm in a very demanding field of being in academia and having to juggle so many different tasks. And sometimes you don't always feel like it's okay to put your health first, but I'm learning to be able to do that. I've also had a lot of experiences lately where I have really had to be my own best advocate in navigating the healthcare system here in the US and dealing with a lot of biases and inequities when it comes to navigating the healthcare system. And so I know oftentimes when we're working with clients, we're often advocating on their behalf and working with them within the systems that they're interacting in. But myself, lately, I've been interacting in these same systems and have had to learn to be my own best advocate. And so that's where I am.
Yes, that's awesome. I just want to say, as someone who, is really focused on liberation and who's always curious about this idea of resistance, I think it's really powerful for you to start out saying that choosing to rest, choosing to listen to your body, right? It that in and of itself is an act of resistance. It is how you live countercultural to the values and the demands of the society. So I think that's dope straight out the gate. Like that was amazing. What is your current sense of vocation right now?
Well, for me, I think, well, I know for sure. One thing I know for sure is that my greatest calling that I feel God has gifted me with and implanted in my spirit is a love and a heart for teaching. And so God is showing me ways to incorporate my research and my love of studying fathers, Black fathers in particular, into that work. But I think my greatest sense of vocation, I would say, has to be teaching. And I would say even more specifically, teaching research and data analysis courses and social work programs. These are the courses that students oftentimes struggle with. And certainly me as a Black woman, many of them have not had that experience. They have not been taught by a Black woman, especially with courses that they find challenging. And so I think that God has uniquely placed me at Baylor for such a time as this to be able to be in that space
Wow.
and to stand firmly in my position as a Black woman and teach these courses that oftentimes are not taught like by people who look like me. And so I
That's
think
great.
it's an interesting combination of being in a social work program, but teaching STEM related courses. And so
Mhm.
I really am very proud of the work that I've been able to do at Baylor through these courses. And they're ones that I hold very near and dear to me. And so I always tell people I'm not a clinician, nor do I claim to be, but I feel like my greatest contribution to the profession is really helping students to see the value of research for their practice. And so that's all I teach in the School of Social Work at Baylor is research methods and data analysis. And that's all I want to teach. And so I'm just thankful for the
Oh
opportunity
my
to
gosh.
do that.
Do you know what? Just, I mean, like, even so, I know we're doing this interview and I've known you for a while now, but I had no idea that that was all that you taught or the reason behind why you teach what you teach. And I just want to say, as you were talking, like the hair on my arm was like standing up. I could feel that, like, when you think about research methods, when you think analysis, a lot of the times students will roll their eyes. That's the class a lot of social work students are going to struggle with because we're not math people, right? And so the fact that you're like, I want to be positioned in this place so that the thing that you maybe are dreading or the thing that you feel the most insecure about learning, I'm going to be in that place in order to help and support and encourage you to thrive. that is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is powerful to have that vision. You're like a secret ninja assassin that is just in this specific place, and maybe it doesn't look glamorous, but like you're there, and you know that you're there for a specific reason. That's amazing. That's really powerful. Are there any current projects that you're currently working on, that you would want to uplift or share with us today?
Yeah, so one is called the Fatherhood Health and Attitudes Survey Project, and this is a nationwide study that focuses on exploring and understanding the mental and physical health outcomes of fathers, mainly Black fathers. I'm most excited about this project because through this project, part of what we're going to be looking at is the impact of fatherhood or fathering experiences on the mental and physical health outcomes of men. And one of the things that I feel like this is really going to be a significant contribution to the current literature, because we currently understand the impact that fathers have on children. We know that fathers, we now know that fathers, and I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? That fathers have a important and significant impact on the lives and the development of their kids. But now we have an empirical base to suggest that this is the case. And so we know, and we've already learned that and studied that and investigated that. And so what we know less about is the impact of actually being a father, the impact that that has on men in terms of their development. And so, I always say that sometimes we forget, that as men are parenting, that they're also developing themselves. They're also
Yes.
going through their own processes of development that we still have yet to understand. We don't really know how fatherhood really impacts the well-being of men. And so I think that's one of the things that we'll be able to look at and investigate in this project. And we're also looking at some really exciting variables within the study as well that are not often studied in nationwide surveys of fathers. And so I think that we'll be contributing to the literature in those ways too, by looking at some of the understudied variables.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I love what you just shared. I was excited. I started smiling as you were talking. As you know, I'm a mother, and I think one of the most um, helpful and powerful things that anybody shared with me as we were getting ready to welcome this little bundle into our life. Someone said to me, "Well, Kelly, you know that the same time a child is born, so is the mother." And so there's not an expectation for you to know or to be perfect or to have a clear sense of like what you're doing and feeling really confident. There's really is this opportunity for you to make mistakes, for you to ask questions, for you to try things and figure out what works and what doesn't work for you. And I felt that was like so helpful and so freeing, so that in the early days when you're trying to figure out what you're actually doing, like what does a routine even look like, right? I was able to give myself a lot of grace and some space. And I think that like what you're proposing is really powerful in the same way that we don't know all of the things that factor into how motherhood shapes a woman. We also don't know what fatherhood looks like, and what is that training process and that development process for men. And so that's really intriguing to me. I can't wait to hear more and have you back on the podcast in order to tell us all of the things that you are finding out and the implications for practice and the conclusions that you're reaching, because that is really, really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about um, what inspires the work that you do, and also what informs your interest in Black fathers? Why Black dads?
Yeah.
You could have picked anything as a research interest. Why Black fathers?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll kind of go back to my doctoral studies at Howard University. I was able to work with one of my mentors there, Dr. Ivory Tolson, and he was doing a lot of work at the time that I was going through my doctoral program. He was doing a lot of work related to the achievement gap, specifically looking at young Black males and how they were faring in the education system. And so
Mhm.
I did a lot of work with him in that area and was very passionate about that work. But when it came time to really come have that coming to Jesus time of like, what am I going to focus my dissertation on? What's going to be my niche, my thing, the thing that I can really strongly identify with? I had to really do a lot of soul searching. And so I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of praying, a lot of thinking, a lot of, really just kind of digging deep to figure out what is this thing that I can dedicate myself to. And as I thought more and more, I realized how important my relationship with my own father
Mm.
to me growing up. There was a period of time when my father was in my life. He was there for the majority of my life. And then there was a short period of time where he wasn't there. So I had a sort of a brief glimpse into what it might have been like to not have a father. And
Yeah.
that was when my parents divorced when I was 17. And I saw so many of the challenges that my dad went through, particularly when it came to raising my siblings that we did not live in the home with. So my non-resident siblings,
Okay.
seeing some of the things that he went through with their mother and some of the challenges that he had, because it's not that he didn't want to be there. He just didn't, his circumstances were not such that he could be. For example, she moved the children 4 hours away to Las Vegas. So that didn't make it
Wow.
possible for my father to be there with them as consistently as he was able to be when they were closer.
Yes.
And so, and still to this day, I watch some of the struggles and the challenges that my dad has in his relationship with my brother, my only biological brother, because my brother has one story about why my father wasn't there, and then my father has his own story about why he wasn't there, and somehow the two have not quite met. And
Mhm.
so it's just been a real struggle watching the hurt and the pain that my father feels as a result of this divide between him and my brother. And I know that he wants a relationship with my brother, but they're just in a rut, and that's been really painful to see. And I know my dad's heart. I know the kind of man that my dad is, and I know that he is a wonderful father. But this one particular situation is one in which, he hasn't really been able to be the kind of father that he's wanted to be because of several obstacles. And so seeing that really made me want to change the narrative. Really, when I started out with my dissertation, my focus was on non-resident fathers for that reason. So that's sort of where
Mhm.
my passion began. And I do more now, I do more work on just fathers in general. But when I started, it was really a narrow focus on non-resident fathers, because I really believe that they're one of the most misunderstood groups of fathers.
Yes. Yes.
There's a ton of research out there on married fathers, but and that's kind of where the research began, was on married, and more specifically married white fathers. And
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
literature has, well, let me be even more specific, married white middle class fathers.
Well,
And so the research is starting to evolve and is really starting to take a closer look at the diversity among fathers. But I think when I came along and first started doing this work, it was really based on my relationship with my own dad and wanting to change the narrative and help people to understand and uncover the narratives of non-resident fathers, and help people understand the complexity that lies within so many of them.
I love that. I I love that. I mean, your dad sounds like a remarkable man who's been through a lot. Um, and it's the way in which you just answered that question is really helpful for the next question that I have, which is, what are some of the common narratives that are perpetuated that tend to shape how people see Black fathers?
Mhm.
Um, so I know, for example, back in the day when we were coming up, there was this whole story about crack babies and crack and babies being born addicted to crack, and they weren't gonna be able to thrive. And now we know that was not actually true. That
Mhm.
was not an accurate depiction of how cocaine was impacting the body. And so what would you say are some of the common narratives that are being told about Black dads, that maybe need to be examined on a more deeper level?
Yeah, so I think, kind of what I just mentioned is, in particular, when it comes to fathers that don't um, that don't live in the home with their children on a full-time basis. I think that there's so much to be understood there. I think that we have, sort of a definition of what we think it means to be involved with children. And we're looking for a particular pattern of involvement most of the time. But I think that, many times fathers are involved with their kids in ways that are not necessarily understood by the general public. There are a lot of things that happen, behind closed doors, and arrangements or agreements that they have with those in their lives that make things work for them, in terms of their family arrangements, their way of going about doing family, and it oftentimes does not look like, mainstream nuclear, kind of family structures that we have, historically applied to our understanding of family life in America. I think that as Black families, we've never quite fit that mold. Culturally, we have always had a different way of going about doing most things. And so I think that, we really have to take the time to broaden our definition of what it means to be involved, and really understand and meet these dads where they are, and understand the challenges that they face. Because, oftentimes I think people have the perception that dads are sitting back happy, that they're not involved. And I don't think that's the case. I think when we really look at the day-to-day lives and circumstances and experiences, especially of non-resident fathers, many of them struggle in silence and in many ways that they don't always talk about because they want to be involved. But sometimes they either didn't necessarily have a model themselves, or they don't know how to be, or they're having some struggle of their own that they're experiencing, that they're having a difficult time with getting past. And they need that, someone there to help them to get unstuck, to move past those challenges. But I think that there are so many things that we have yet to understand. And we make a lot of assumptions, about these men. And we have not yet truly uncovered their authentic stories to really begin to understand their patterns of involvement.
Yeah, as you're talking, the best, I'm smiling because I'm thinking like maybe the best example of what you're actually talking about is right in front of all of us and has been for a couple of weeks now, um, white, heteronormative, middle class ideas of parenting versus Nick Cannon running around having all these babies and all of the fallout that we've seen, all of the hysteria surrounding this man who's I think baby number 10 was just born. And people calling him irresponsible, people calling him, inattentive, or having mental health problems because he's running around having all these babies and he can't, you're not going to be able to live with the kids in their house. So why are you doing this? And so that collision of the values between like what we describe as normal, and then what is the way that in which Black men maybe navigate spaces that don't fit into that narrative. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on or anything that you want to say about the Nick Cannon experience at all? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
I have really refrained from really making any hard and fast judgments about his family dynamics. I don't know the details, the way we would define what we see happening with him in the literature, though, is what we refer to as multiple partner fertility, right? He has multiple children with multiple women. And we know, the struggles, many of the men who are in these kinds of circumstances have. So, we don't know what's happening with him
exactly
in his personal life and what he's
that's
experiencing
right,
mentally, physically, all of the
financially,
things,
yes,
financially. I mean, just all of the things that could potentially contribute to some of the decisions that he's made. And so I'm very hesitant to make any judgments.
I think that is so wise and just it is, and it's very respectful. So yeah, thank you for that. How Can practitioners ensure that Black fathers, Black dads are engaged in the assessment and the treatment process effectively? Do you have any tips on how services can be more inclusive in the participation of Black fathers?
Well, I think that, and this is one of the things that I keep beating my drum, in social work education about the need to help practitioners to understand the unique needs of fathers. And it's not just Black fathers, but just fathers in general. When we think about the social work profession, it's not so much, it's more majority female, not necessarily female dominant, because when we look at, you know, administrative positions and those who are
That's
in
right.
leadership within the social work profession, it is mostly men.
That's
But
right.
but it is female dominant in the sense that most of the folks who occupy these positions are women. And so with that being said, we have tons of literature out there that has um, provided empirical evidence for the experiences that many men have had when engaging with and navigating social service systems. And the individuals who are at the front line of those systems are often women. And so I really feel like, when they're navigating through the educational process and they're preparing themselves to serve in these systems, they really need to be challenged to confront their own biases. It
Yes.
comes to working with men and fathers. As women, we all have a father, we all have, men in our lives in different ways, brothers, husbands, whatnot, in a sort of a history of interactions with men that we bring, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. And these
Mhm.
are all things that we need to kind of put out there, on
Yes.
the table when we're going through, whatever the degree program, whether it be social work or child and family studies or whatever the program you're matriculating through. At some point, you as women, I believe we have to be challenged,
Mm.
to confront our biases and in ways that are going to be meaningful and transformative, and in ways that are going to allow us to engage more authentically with fathers in our practice. I've had conversations with students just anecdotally, when I used to, the prior institution that I worked at before starting at Baylor. I've had conversations with students about their comfort levels of engaging with fathers in practice. And honestly, many of them have said they are uncomfortable. And
Mm.
I also had a recent conversation with a colleague where she mentioned, that she was talking with some students in one of her courses and the same thing surfaced. And she was a little bit concerned, about some of the things that they had to say, about men, and so these are things that, oftentimes just kind of come up in casual conversation, but they're real things that we have to really kind of grapple with and deal with,
Yes.
as it relates to, the perceptions that we hold about men, about fathers. We have to deal with those things before we actually get out there into the field and begin to work with and engage with them. And then also, I think it's important to kind of dovetailing off of that, to educate oneself about the unique needs of men and fathers and the diversity. Sometimes we forget how diverse men and fathers are and how diverse their experiences can be. And so, they're not a monolithic group. It's not, their experiences are not all the same. And so I have a couple of manuscripts that I'm working on now that talk about this very thing, which is the importance of integrating this content into core social work courses. So I'm in the social work profession, and so I'm really starting with targeting my own profession and looking
Yes.
inwardly and starting there and saying, hey, we need to pay attention to this, and here are some of the courses that this kind of content can be integrated into. For example, I'm starting with human behavior in the social environment. That's the first course that
Mhm.
I'm starting with, and kind of giving some insights for students as well as educators on how to talk about fathers in these courses. And particularly, we're focusing, the manuscript I'm referring to, we're focusing in this first one on marginalized and vulnerable groups of fathers. So reentry fathers, divorced fathers, single fathers, kinship care fathers. So all of the father groups that we know
Wow.
to be more vulnerable. And so in this paper, we also kind of touch on their intersectionalities and how their race and gender and class intersect. impact to influence their experiences. And so we're just trying to give folks some insight and some things to think about as they navigate these courses and as they navigate social work programs in general. I always try to sensitize my students to these things, because I often find when I talk with them in my classes about this, it's a lot of things that they don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really try to integrate this as much as I can, even into my courses, just to give students some things to think about as they move forward in their journey.
Powerful. That is powerful what you're talking about. I love that, what I took away from that was interrogating your biases, right? And so like and immediately as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, so what kind of questions can I come up with to ask my students? What questions can I ask other therapists that I'm working with about how they perceive and how they approach working with and how they empower fathers, right? And of your biases, that is powerful. All of us really do, we really do come in with baggage and a track record of how we've interacted with men.
Mhm.
I've never heard someone say that before, so that was really powerful. Dr. Lemmons, thank you for sharing that. If people want to find you on social media, or if they want to learn more about the work that you're doing, how do we find you? Where are you at?
So they can find me on the Black Female Fatherhood Scholars Network, which is our website is www.bffsn.com. We're also on Twitter. Our handle is at BFFS Network. Network is spelled without the O, so that's NETWRK. And we're also on Facebook. You can just search us under the Black Female Fatherhood Scholars Network.
Wow. Okay. Oh my gosh. So many great ways for people to connect with you and to follow, keep a pulse on the work that you're doing, because it is important and significant. I'm so thankful to you for having this time to share and to connect and to uplift the things that are near to your heart and also the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And I would invite everyone to follow along. I will post the links in our transcript of this recording so that people can follow along and watch and see your rising as you do all the things that you are called to do. So thank you.
Thank you.